The member for South West Coast.
Well, this is a brutal budget that leaves the Victorian community in a position where life will be harder. Life is certainly getting harder under Labor. Victorians, particularly regional Victorians, are being punished by Labor's fiscal incompetence. So let's recall the words of the Premier. Just before the 2014 election, there will be no new taxes in a government I lead. Well, almost 50 new taxes later. And if we look what happened before the 2022 election 5-6 months ago, we heard from the Treasurer saying we will deliver on our election commitments with no new or increased taxes. Now, before you say, well, you know, we have had a pandemic, well, this COVID credit card comment is nothing more than a misnomer, because if you look at the budget before any COVID pandemic, you will see that the debt was blowing out under Labor significantly, because we know, and we've known every time we see them in government, that Labor can't manage money. So we've got a Premier who can't recall and a Treasurer who can't budget. There is no expert saying that this is a good financial position that we find ourselves in as a state. Victoria is broke. Unbelievably, our debt is $165 billion, increasing, as demonstrated in this budget, to $171 billion, and going further to reach $200 billion. Now, despite the increase in taxes that you would think would then reduce the debt, there is no debt reduction. By the predicted forecast time in this budget, debt increases, despite taxes on jobs, taxes on schools, taxes on renters, and tax on debt. What you will see here in Victoria is per day, the debt interest repayment will go from $10 million per day to $22 million that this state has to find per day just to pay the interest, not reduce debt, to pay the interest. So let me say that one more time. Increased debt, increased taxes. So that means increased revenue but no debt reduction. Now, what could that $22 million per day buy in South West Coast? It could fix roads. It could put infrastructure that needs desperately to be fixed up and refurbished and developed on the agenda. It could buy so much. You would think, with those alarming figures, Labor would be reining in their spending. But no, this is a government who will not recognise the truth about how they've wasted $31 billion in cost blowouts on the projects they call the big build. All of those projects in Melbourne that have cost way more, and I'm talking billions, than they were supposed to. The costing that they have done for projects has not worked. They have not done their due diligence, and the evidence is clear for all to see. So what are we getting for those blowouts that we see? What did we get for those big build projects in the regions? We're not getting anything in the regions. They're all in Melbourne. And you would think, even in the budget, this government are saying they are cutting 3,000 to 4,000 public servants. Now, when we were in government in 2014, there were $18 billion paid in wages. That's now $35 billion. So even though they're going to cut 3,000 to 4,000 public servants, they're going to take the wages bill up from that $35 billion to $38 billion. So cutting jobs but spending more on the wages of those who are left. So what is it that we get in South West Coast? What did we expect to see in this budget? Well, the state of our roads have been in crisis since Labor first came into government and started cutting the maintenance budget. You would have expected, anyone would have been reasonably expecting to see a very big investment into the roads in regional Victoria, because it is clear, if you drive on them, as we all do daily, that they are failing. These, whether it's broken rims, potholes, crumbling shoulders, our roads are in a mess. And Victorians, regional Victorians, South West Coast residents are suffering due to Labor's financial incompetence. Remember, what would $22 million a day in interest do for our roads? Under Labor, Victoria is broke and our roads are going backwards as a result. Our debt is more than Queensland, Tasmania and New South Wales put together. But we're not seeing what New South Wales see in their roads, for example, or Queensland's roads. I've recently just taken a drive to have a look because I'm hearing from so many that ours are so worse, and they are. So here we have a government sending us backwards. Labor is punishing Victorians, punishing South West Victorians. $380 million reduction in annual spending on road maintenance since 2020. A massive 45% cut. That is just unbelievable given the state of the roads, but we wouldn't expect that a very city-centric government even understands. They're not coming out to have a look, although we did see the minister come out recently. The minister for roads came and had a look and said she stands ready. Well, the budget came out the week later and she's not ready because she's cut the budget by a massive 45% since 2020. This year alone, on budget paper 3, book 3, page 310, so you can look it up, the roads maintenance budget is cut by a further 25% to just $441 million. This is actually less than the last budget of the former coalition government in 2014. That's a decade ago. Think about that. This government is spending less on maintenance than the coalition government did a decade ago. Look how much money has changed, what it bought you a decade ago to what it buys you today. And yet we're seeing our road toll climb tragically. The road toll is up 35% more today than it was this time last year. And yet, at the same time, Labor is ripping $3 billion from the TAC to prop up its budget. Under Labor, Victoria is broke and road safety is paying the consequences. We should have seen a massive injection. What we saw was a cut. The increase in taxes doesn't help the housing crisis we have in South West Coast. We have a government who has wasted money here too. Despite the billions they say they spend on building houses across Victoria, there are only 75 new homes added to the amount of homes in the pool of social housing that this government is being overseeing. I met recently with the CEO of the Women's Housing Association. It's not a government department. They are building 31 houses in Portland alone. They are getting on with building houses. They're actually only building 8 in Warrnambool. And why? They want to build a lot more. They can build a lot more. It's the red tape and the land unavailability that this government are making sure it's too hard. We had, as an election promise, to send flying squads into councils so we could free up land and get roofs over people's heads. The windfall gains tax, one of the 50 that this government have implemented, starts on July 1. Now, I'll tell you now, the farmers who have got the land available to subdivide will not be selling that land whilst this windfall gains tax is in place. Giving 50 to 60% of your farm that you've farmed all your life and is your superannuation to the government is just not something they will do. They'll keep their beefies on it and there will not be that subdivision available, and we will not have roofs over people's heads. This government's actions will stifle the ability to build and put roofs over people's heads, and homelessness is what we see as a result of that. And I've seen it incredibly over the last 10 years, from when I worked in Aboriginal health, when we saw a lot of people couch surfing, but not homeless. And now what do I see? People homeless on the streets, in doorways, down at the Surfside area. What I have women coming into my office, women with children saying, we've listened to the government say if we're in a domestic violence situation, we will be looked after. I have now left. I've finally got the empowerment within me to do that, and I'm sleeping in my car with my children. That is what I hear. And we go to the government time and time again and say, where are your solutions? There are houses sitting idle. St Vincent's de Paul come to me from Warrnambool saying there are houses sitting idle. It's so disappointing that this government is delivering nothing on the promises that they say in South West Coast. The Lookout Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation Centre. That was something we all expected to see. That hard-working community, the committee who have for 7 years worked very closely with this government and tried their hardest to meet every criteria that they could and have done so. Every other part of Victoria has a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre. And what would you expect to see? Such a normal service required in every area, and we're the only ones without one. It's the COVID debt, they say. We have the least funding per capita of any state for health in this nation. And that's why we're not getting the Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation Centre. Victoria is broke because you should have, and any reasonable government would be funding this. The only reason they're not doing it is they can't. They know they need to do it. The mental health services that do so much work in our region, the Let's Talk program, the Standing Tall program, Big Life, another one, I could list a lot, organically grown services that take pressure off the CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health team, the Psych Services team, left with nothing, and yet they would help. They would help this situation, not make it worse. Victoria is clearly broke. Health and education have also not avoided the axe. Health is in crisis, and I am so concerned about the South West Healthcare missing out of being one of the health services that gets pushed forward. In the budget, it has been identified it will be another year later than was originally decided. There are 10 health services that were funded in the 2018 budget. South West Healthcare was announced in 2020. As a community, South West Coast, we need to be alert and alarmed to this government's false promises and do what we can to support our hard-working nurses and doctors and the admin team who are working to get that hospital built. But we need to watch closely and keep the pressure on. We're a long way from Melbourne, and that's why our health service is so important and do such a good job. The accident emergency team, the theatre teams working in extraordinary cramped conditions. The rail line. No announcement. Again, 2017, we were promised new carriages, new train sets. The government won't identify any for Warrnambool. They just keep stringing us along, and our train services don't improve. Labor's run out of money, and our Surf Life Saving Club, the basketball stadium in Portland, hockey in Warrnambool, the breakwater that's so iconic and needs injections of fund. Warrnambool College, who have nowhere for the whole school to meet in shelter. Port Fairy Football Netball Club and South Warrnambool Football Club need an injection of funds. But under this government, this tired, disinterested, disorganised and now chaotic government, they're not going to see those projects this year. It is incredibly disappointing, but we would expect that from a government who has told us one thing and then done another. A corrupt government who mismanages money, and when they run out of money, they come after yours. And we're seeing that in this budget with a tax on jobs, a tax on renters, tax on schools and tax on debt. The biggest debt of New South Wales Queensland and Tasmania put together. But we're not seeing the services that they see. We're seeing debt that's going to continue to grow and interest rates that will cost us $22 million a day.